Hello and welcome. I'm Megan Billingsley, and I'll be leading our conversation today. With us is Micah Tindor, Assistant Vice President of Consumer Vehicle Disposal. Micah leads the strategic direction and execution of the consumer vehicle disposal portfolio within Cox Automotive, including Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, focused on providing the best trade-in solution for dealers, consumers, OEMs, and partners. Micah, welcome.
Megan, delighted to be with you and the listeners.
Looking forward to this conversation today, where we'll be discussing how dealers can navigate tight inventory swings and shifting market conditions as Q4 and the year end bring seasonal buying trends and new challenges. So, with that, then, Micah, let's start with the big picture. What are the most important trends in the trade-in market right now, and how should dealers be thinking about inventory pressures and consumer equity challenges?
Well, there's really three big trends right now. It's what's going on in EV, and then you hit two of them already, Megan. The pressures and the inventory challenges. If we start on the EV side, so it's so present in the news right now, what's really important on the trade side with EVs is consumers are still bringing in EVs for trade, and consumers are still interested in buying EVs. And as we think about, there used to be a $7,000 new car safety blanket, a $4,000 used car safety blanket. Now that that's gone, what dealers need to do is really be sharp on their EV appraisals. We're starting to see wholesale lane efficiency drop, so the EVs are not selling as well. We're starting to see a little bit of an EV drop, and even in September, there's like a 1.2% drop in EV MMR retention, so they're not retaining as much value. So one of the things right now that dealers need to pay attention to is what is the value of the EV, and am I pricing it correctly in case it needs to go to wholesale while putting enough money to attract the customer as part of a trade. The other two you mentioned are really driving a lot of that need to pay attention. And one of them is affordability. Interestingly, Kelley Blue Book just announced that we just reached the highest average transaction price for a new car ever. $50,080, which is crazy to think about. Not that long ago, it was at $47,000. And at the same time, because of the COVID chip shortage timeframe, we're about 5.5 million vehicles light of where we would normally be. So dealers are really in a squeeze point with consumers right now where consumers can't afford some of the higher end vehicles and there's less vehicles to start to populate that more affordable segment. That's creating a real challenge with that third point, which is as of last month, 26.1% of consumers that walk in the door with the trade are underwater on their loan. That's up from 24.1% in Q4 of last year. And unfortunately, it's the highest amount of underwater on average ever at $6,800. So right now, as we're moving towards the end of the quarter, end of the year, I'm sorry, what dealers really need to pay attention to are as those EVs are coming in, are they putting the right money on it for what could be a bit of a sliding EV market? Secondly, are they stocking the right inventory for themselves right now with that constraint of affordability and inventory constraint? And then as that consumer's coming in with that underwater vehicle, are you ready to put as much money on the hood as possible to try to put that deal together?
So, really, a lot of things to keep in mind there. Thank you for covering that. As we finish out Q4, what seasonal challenges or opportunities should dealers be watching for? How can they adjust their acquisition plans to make the most of holiday and year end buying trends?
The main thing that dealers need to be looking out for right now is the same thing that I would tell them every time we move into Q4, which is from a seasonal perspective, need to be looking for that sales pace versus inventory level conversation. Sales are starting to slow a little bit. In September, the used car side saw about a 3.9% reduction in sales, though CPO really struggled at about 20% reduction in sales. Um, and on the new car side, it's starting to slow a little bit as well, and inventory is starting to stack up a little bit. So that's normal for this type of time of year, right? We always start to see that coming out of summer, it slows down a little bit until you hit December to remember. What is not normal though for this time of year that dealers need to be paying attention to is what are the impacts from tariffs going to be, and what are the impacts from these EV tax credit adjustments going to be? We also have the little bit of unknown that the Fed, with a rate adjustment fairly recently, that could impact APRs. Now, historically, when the Fed did their last rate adjustment last year, it made no impact on APRs. And the used APR is still historically high at a little over 13%. New still pretty high at 9%. So right now, as there's a little more instability in this normal slow period, what dealers really need to focus on is how can they have a proactive acquisition strategy to target the vehicles that they know are going to drive gross, that they know are going to move at the right pace in their market, and get sharper and sharper at avoiding those vehicles that they're not really sure of the pace, the sales pace on, so that as they move into this market with a little bit slower sales pace normally in the fall, they're not stuck holding a lot of inventory moving into the winter season.
Sounds like a very strategic approach then is needed this year in particular. Thank you. When it comes to staying ahead of inventory swings, what does a proactive acquisition strategy really look like? What steps can dealers take to make sure their teams are set up for success?
This is my favorite conversation of the year. We did 5 acquisition seminars so far this year with dealer groups all across the US. And what's starting to stand out is controlling your controllables through data. And when we talk about how can you really have a proactive acquisition strategy, it's going actually backwards in a step for a minute. We all know that there's 7 acquisition channels. So you can buy from off lease, you can get vehicles from the auction, dealer trades, and so on and so on. What dealers need to do to start is to go back and look at their history of acquisitions and figure out which channel provides the best results, which channel has the best ROI, and what should my acquisition channel blend be. A lot of us go out and mine historic channels without taking the time to understand, is that the best channel for me? Does it have the highest ROI? And then they need to start building that acquisition channel blend appropriately and compensating their teams to go after their channels appropriately. While they're in there mining the data, the other thing to look out for is, are you putting the right money on the right car at the right time? Right now, the average consumer has 2.6 cash offers when they arrive at a dealership with their trade. So they have other options. And on average, there's about a $2,000 gap between those offers. Millennial and Gen Z have about 4 to 6 offers. And a lot of times, what I hear from dealers is, I can't put enough money on the hood to be competitive with some of the monsters. And what dealers start to identify is if they look back in their data, control their controllables, if they look back at their data and say, what vehicles generate gross for me? Front end gross, back end gross, some service work. But what vehicles when I buy them and then resell them also create a tail of acquisition, a tail of revenue, meaning a trade comes on that vehicle. I get another front end, back end gross, another bit of service work. A trade comes on that vehicle. And dealers are starting to get smart about which vehicles have a long tail of ROI, generating ROI over ROI, versus which have a short tail. And when you pair those two sets of data together, that's where you can get proactive. That's when you can start to say, okay, I know these acquisition channels work for me. I know these vehicles create the most value in a three-tailed model. So I'm going to put an extra 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever. And then in the end, you align that with staffing. So when it gets comes to being really strategic around acquisitions, when I say let's be strategic, it's around let's step back for a minute. Let's go back and mine our data and figure out what vehicles exactly should we be targeting a dealer in what channels, and then comp our teams appropriately to want to go work in that channel.
Great insights, Micah. Thank you so much. How are scalable solutions like Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer and new tools like Offer Accelerator helping dealers not only source vehicles more efficiently, but also build customer trust, improve lead conversion, and stay ahead of seasonal acquisition needs?
Well, at the core, Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer is all about empowering dealers to source more vehicles directly from consumers. And what we're able to do is to help dealers do that at a better look to book rate and with a better cost to market advantage. And it all comes back to the idea that we start by helping the customers to build trust in the value of their vehicle by guiding them through a process and then bridging that trust over to the dealer so that they don't have to then start a second set of questions. And for us, we've been spending a lot of time over the last 2 years looking at what are the consumer expectations and what are the dealer expectations of this process and trying to build tools to help match those expectations. And Offer Accelerator that you mentioned is a new tool that's going to help dealers have access to those consumers in a seasonal adjusted market. So it's launching very soon. And what it's going to deliver for the dealers is the ability to turn those opportunities on and off as they see fit to match that strategic inventory match strategy. And then what else we've released lately that I think is worth calling out are things like counteroffer, where consumers have been raising their hand saying I'm underwater on my loan, but there's no way for me to tell the dealer when I get my offer. So counteroffer lets the consumers raise their hand. And we have a couple of things coming up leveraging AI. We know a lot of consumers struggle with identifying damage in their vehicles, so sneak peek might have something at NADA worth checking out that helps consumers with that process. But in the end, the way that Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer really helps out the dealer and the consumer both is by starting a ground of trust. Instead of starting with doubt, which a lot of consumers doubt the process because they only do it once every 7 to 8 years, start with a trusted source, bridge to that trust to the dealer, and it's a much easier conversation for the dealer and the consumer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I feel like we could talk about this for another 30 minutes alone, but that is all the time that we have for today. So thank you, Micah, for joining us today, and of course to all of you for tuning in. To learn more about how Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer and new tools like Offer Accelerator can help dealers win in Q4 and all year, visit b2b.kbb.com/ICO. Have a great day, everyone.